Have you ever said, "I just wish they could read my mind," and wondered why they never could? Or declared, "I know my worth," but deep down, still felt unseen? What if emotional strength isn't about silence or slogans but about clarity, presence, and truth? In this video, we'll unravel the hidden layers behind the words we often use as shields, not just in love, but in how we seek to be understood. From "I don't need a man" to "you should just know," we'll explore how modern empowerment sometimes becomes modern isolation. Through Stoic philosophy and emotional intelligence, we'll go beyond defense mechanisms into real intimacy, grounded boundaries, and the courage to speak what silence can't carry. If you're ready to live, love, and speak from a deeper place, hit subscribe, because the most powerful transformation begins with self-awareness. 1. I just wish you could read my mind. It examines the hidden expectations behind it, reframes it with emotional intelligence, and ties in Stoic insights, all in a flowing narrative meant for mature, thoughtful listeners. I just wish you could read my mind. At first, it sounds romantic, like a wistful longing for deep, intuitive connection. It suggests, if you truly love me, you'll just know what I'm thinking. But here's the quiet truth. This isn't intimacy. It's emotional outsourcing, disguised as charm. Because real love doesn't come with a psychic link. It comes with words. It starts with honest communication, not telepathy. Imagine a scene. A couple sits across from each other. One is quiet, pensive, and the other waits. Finally, she says with a small sigh, "Why can't you just know what's on my heart?" He feels the pressure, something unsaid, urgent, important, but he's watching her, waiting, guessing. He wonders, is she sad, angry, needs space, needs reassurance? He wants to understand, but unless she speaks, he's tangled in her silence, and she feels he must be missing something, that he should be intuitive enough, that in a well-tuned couple, words aren't needed. But that fantasy, uninhibited understanding, is exactly that, a fantasy. Let's talk about Mia. Creative, introspective, longing to be known. David, warm-hearted but more pragmatic. Mia often says, "I just want you to get me without me saying anything." When David doesn't respond as she hopes, she withdraws. He gets confused, frustrated. She reasons, he should just know. But what he hears is, "You failed me, you didn't show up." So he responds by shutting down a little more. They drift, silently. The problems grow in the quiet. Research in communication shows that assumption kills connection. When you expect someone to just know, you skip vulnerability, don't name your feelings. You create a silent hierarchy where one partner is mind reader, the other is blamed. You trap them in the vague zone, "You don't get me." And this breeds resentment because silence is fertile ground for disappointment. Stoicism emphasizes clarity and responsibility in how we relate to others. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is wrong, I will change." But that only works when there is clear communication, when assumptions aren't allowed to masquerade as love. Epictetus reminded, the essence of character is doing the right thing even in the small stuff. And so the small stuff, the unsaid, the unexpressed, matters as much as the grand gestures. Expecting someone to read your mind is a refusal to do the smallest moral work. Speak up. Let's be honest, it's not love, it's power. When someone demands that unspoken understanding, they're testing. Did you notice me? They're controlling. If you loved me, you'd know. They shield themselves. "I don't have to say, but I'll punish you for not knowing." It's emotional manipulation, hidden, gentle but still coercive. Let's reimagine what could be said. Instead of "I wish you could read my mind," try this: "I want you to know what's going on with me, so I'll try to say it." Notice the shift from "you should guess" to "I'll tell you." You're not asking them to be prophets, you're inviting them to witness you. Picture it. Mia says, "I'm feeling disconnected. I want to talk, not well just to share what's on my mind." David responds, "Thank you for saying that. I'm listening." No telepathy, no frustration, just openness. First step, they trade silence for curiosity. In Stoicism, premeditation means preparing your mind for recurring emotional challenges. So when a partner usually sulks in silence, you can prepare to speak. Today, when I feel him withdrawing, I'll say, "Something's up, can we talk?" And you'll prepare yourself mentally, If he tries to guess my mood, I'll say directly. Small acts of clarity, not control, not mind games, just honesty. Here's what happens when you break the silence. You reduce pressure. He no longer has to guess if she's upset. You build trust. She feels safe enough to share vulnerable thoughts. You increase psychological safety, because feeling unseen is the opposite of love. Being seen through words that starts to heal. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nothing happens to anyone which he cannot endure." Part of enduring life is speaking your needs. Another part is listening with grace. So you hold the truths. I am responsible for telling you what matters to me. You are responsible for listening, but not mind reading. That's equitable. That's mature. That's love as partnership. Let them teach us. Mia begins. David, I've been quieter lately. It's not you. I'm feeling overwhelmed. David, I'm here. You can tell me what's heavy. Silence breaks, not conquered, not avoided. It becomes a shared moment. They exchange truth instead of guessing games. That's a freedom worth more than assumed intimacy. When you say, I just wish you could read my mind, you hand control away. You build resentment on silence. But when you say, I'll tell you what's inside, can you listen? You reclaim your voice, your agency, your connection. It's not less romantic. It's more honest. It's not easy. It's intentional. And it honors both hearts equally. So next time you feel that pull wanting someone to read you, pause. Because maybe what you really need is not to be understood by default, but to speak your truth and invite someone in. That's intimacy that stands, grows, and endures. That's love rooted in clarity, not confusion. Double quotes. I know my worth. At first glance, it sounds empowering, doesn't it? A declaration of confidence. A woman who knows herself, stands her ground, and refuses to settle. And when it's rooted in truth, it's beautiful. But I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation where that phrase felt off? Where I know my worth didn't feel like strength, but like a wall? You see, true self-worth whispers. It's quiet, consistent, unshaken. But often, when someone keeps shouting about their value, what you're really hearing is fear dressed up as confidence. And more often than not, that fear becomes control. I remember a story about a man named Thomas, 62, soft-spoken, former engineer. He met a woman in a grief support group. She was sharp, articulate, and self-assured. She often said things like, I don't tolerate disrespect. I know my worth. At first, it was admirable. He admired her standards. But over time, he noticed a pattern. Anytime he disagreed with her, even gently, she would recoil and say, wow, I guess you don't respect me. If he ever asked for clarity or expressed his own needs, it would be met with, I don't need this. I know my worth. And slowly, Thomas found himself walking on eggshells. Not because he was disrespectful, but because the relationship had no room for two people with equal voices. Only one person's worth was allowed in the room. It's subtle. That's what makes it dangerous. Because the phrase, I know my worth, when used as a tool for self-awareness, builds healthy boundaries. But when used as a weapon, it becomes a tactic to shut down growth, silence feedback, and demand compliance. The Stoics warned us of this. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters. And Marcus Aurelius reminded us that the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. Sometimes, the loudest declarations are the least rooted in reflection. And here's the deeper truth. Many people, not just women, use this phrase to avoid vulnerability. Because true self-worth requires humility. It says, I know my value, and I'm still learning. But false self-worth says, I'm done learning. The problem is you. When someone uses I know my worth to deflect from every conversation, critique, or emotional moment, they're not demonstrating confidence. They're avoiding accountability. Let's imagine this in a different context. Imagine you're a craftsman. You've built a table strong, elegant, made with care. When you walk into a room, you don't need to yell, this is a quality table. You let people experience it. It speaks for itself. That's how true self-worth works. It's lived, not announced. But what happens when the table keeps falling apart and someone keeps screaming, it's expensive? Okay, it's high quality. You start to realize the price tag doesn't match the integrity. And that's the dynamic many people miss. Because some women will use this phrase, "I know my worth," to justify inflexibility, to avoid hard conversations, to demand your silence and your sacrifice. Not because they're cruel, but because somewhere along the line, they learned that value equals power, and power equals control. But the Stoic man, he knows better. He knows that a healthy relationship doesn't require one person to shrink so the other can feel big. He understands that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of clarity. So when a woman says, "I know my worth," he listens closely. He listens for tone, for pattern, for whether those words invite growth or shut it down, whether she's open to mutuality or just wants obedience. He doesn't argue. He doesn't lecture. He simply aligns himself with truth, because for the Stoic man, discernment is more powerful than debate. Let me share something personal. I once dated a woman, let's call her Rachel. She was magnetic, driven, and brilliant, and she knew it. At least, she said she did. Every conversation about vulnerability ended the same way: "I'm not changing. I know my worth." At first, I admired her, but then I noticed she never apologized, never asked questions, never said, "Tell me more." Over time, I felt less like a partner and more like an audience. Her worth demanded attention. It didn't welcome connection. And I'll be honest, it hurt, because I wanted to grow together. But growth requires honesty, not just slogans. Rachel wasn't evil. She was scared. Somewhere in her life, she'd been undervalued. And instead of healing that, she built a fortress and plastered a banner across the front: "I know my worth." But even the strongest walls collapse when no one is allowed inside. So if you're a man watching this and you've heard those words, ask yourself, does this woman's worth make you feel more seen or more silenced? Do you feel invited into her world or pushed out unless you agree? Do you feel like her value shines from within? Or does she hold it like a sword, ready to strike the moment you offer feedback? Because real love, real connection requires mutual reflection. And true worth doesn't fear being seen. It welcomes it. In the end, the Stoics had it right. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. True worth is lived, day by day, in how we speak, how we listen, how we love. And anyone who truly knows their worth, they don't have to remind you. You feel it. And when you feel it, there's no control, no coercion, no fear. Just respect, balance, and peace. 3. I don't need a man. It sounds bold, defiant, empowered, like a rallying cry for independence. And maybe at some point in history, it needed to be. But when those 5 words show up not as a celebration of strength, but as a weapon against connection, something deeper is happening. I've heard that phrase from women who were hurt, women who were abandoned, women who gave everything, only to watch it be dismissed, betrayed, or taken for granted. So they built something strong, something they could control themselves. They swore they would never need anyone again. And I understand that. I really do. But here's the quiet tragedy no one talks about. When strength turns into a fortress, nothing gets in. Not love, not truth, not the gentle kind of intimacy that only grows when we admit we don't have it all figured out. I once knew a woman named Ellen. She was in her late 50s, ran her own business, owned her home, raised 2 children on her own. On paper, she was the definition of success. But emotionally, she kept everyone at a distance. The moment a man showed interest, even kindly, she'd say it with a smile and a sip of wine: "I don't need a man." It wasn't bitterness in her voice, it was pride. But under that pride was a tiredness I could feel, a part of her that longed to be held, not out of weakness, but out of the simple human desire to be seen. Because independence is beautiful, but isolation disguised as empowerment is lonely. Stoic philosophy reminds us that self-sufficiency is noble, but not at the cost of shutting out growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We were born for cooperation." That doesn't mean dependency. It means harmony, interdependence, knowing how to carry ourselves and still allowing others to walk beside us. The truth is, needing someone doesn't make you weak, but fearing that need, that's a wound. And when a woman uses "I don't need a man" as her default answer to connection, it's not because she's invincible, it's because she's tired of being disappointed. It's not power, it's protection. But protection, that becomes permanent, becomes a prison. Imagine a garden, surrounded by walls so high that not even the sun gets through. No pests, sure, but no nourishment either. That's what emotional self-containment can become. Safe, but slowly starving. And here's what often happens to the man who hears those words. He respects them, maybe too much. He backs off. He doesn't offer his presence. He doesn't risk reaching out. And so the cycle continues to people circling each other, both craving connection, neither willing to admit it. I want to be clear, there's a difference between being emotionally healthy and being emotionally closed. A woman who says, "I don't need a man with a smile and a wall isn't dangerous." She's scared. Scared of repeating patterns. Scared of trusting too soon. Scared that if she lets someone in, she'll lose herself. But the irony is true connection doesn't require you to lose yourself. It requires you to reveal yourself, piece by piece at your own pace. There's a quiet kind of strength in saying, "I've been through enough to stand on my own, but I'm still open." That's the woman who's done the real work, who knows that intimacy isn't a transaction, it's a risk. And that risk doesn't come from need. It comes from courage. The Stoic man doesn't try to fix this dynamic. He doesn't chase or plead. He listens, observes, and decides whether the space is open or closed. He knows that if someone defines themselves by what they reject, they haven't yet defined what they're truly seeking. And he doesn't confuse resistance with power. He knows that softness is not a weakness, it's a choice. The bravest choice, sometimes. Because here's the hard truth. When someone says, "I don't need a man," over and over, what they're really saying is, "I've stopped believing a man could be good for me." And that belief, if never challenged, becomes prophecy. So, to the men watching this, don't internalize her wall as a reflection of your worth. Her pain is not your invitation to bleed for her. Her story is not yours to rewrite, but it is yours to discern. And to the women watching, if those words have ever come out of your mouth, I ask you gently, do you still believe them? Or have they simply become armor? You don't need a man. That's not the point. The point is whether you're still open to love in all its honest, messy, transformative glory. Because needing someone doesn't mean losing yourself. It means trusting that you can be whole on your own and still welcome someone who sees that wholeness and says, "I'm here, not to fix it, but to honor it." True connection doesn't require collapse. It requires space. Space for the people to stand side by side, not leaning, not clinging, just choosing. Not because they need to, but because they want to. And in that space, magic happens. Some words sound strong, but when left unspoken, they build walls instead of bridges. I just wish you could read my mind. I know my worth. I don't need anyone. But when we speak from fear instead of clarity, we don't connect, we protect. Stoicism doesn't teach suppression. It teaches self-awareness. It reminds us that true strength isn't cold distance, but calm truth. Not control, but presence. Not guessing games, but honesty shared with grace. Love isn't built on mind reading. It's built on trust, and trust begins with clear, spoken truth. If you've ever felt exhausted from being misunderstood, from staying silent and calling it strength, then this space is for you. Subscribe now and join a community grounded in emotional maturity, ancient wisdom, and a commitment to honest connection. Because sometimes, what we truly need isn't to be perfectly understood, but to feel safe enough to be fully expressed.